Hello, everyone. Today we're diving into the topic of statistical significance. Explaining this concept to a jury might seem simple on the surface, but it can create real challenges in the courtroom. The differences between what feels significant and what the statistics actually tell us. Here to unpack how jurors' intuition can clash with dense mathematical analysis is Dr. Steve Pomerantz from our advisory group and Michelle Cooper from our trial consulting team. And leading our discussion is Chris Dominic, Senior Strategy and Jury Consulting Advisor here at IMS. Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Adam. We're digging into something deceptively simple but hugely important in the courtroom today. It's the tension between what the math says is significant and what people think is significant. Steve, you've always described yourself as a teacher when you're in front of a jury. How do you approach that role, and how do you protect that teaching style when someone tries to challenge you during cross-examination?
I think that it's important to communicate with people with the language that they're comfortable with and where they're coming from. Nobody is going to adopt or learn my vocabulary in, a day or a week, because it's taken me, 40 years. So nobody's going to learn to speak my language, but I have to learn how to speak other people's language. I have to find out what's their vocabulary, what is their experience, how did they frame ideas in their head, and then use that language.
Yeah, as a communication person, you're speaking my language. So let's put that teacher mindset to work, Steve. Let's start with an easy question that sets the whole conversation up. Is a coin flip fair?
Well, that's something that I think we're all very familiar with. We've all had to flip coins for whatever reason. And we naturally think that, well, you should get half of your flips being heads and half being tails. And if you flip a coin 10 times and you get 4 tails or 5 tails or 6 tails, maybe that doesn't concern you. But if you move further away from that, if you get 3 heads or 2 heads, we will have a natural inclination at some point to think that the coin is broken, for lack of a better word. As a statistician, we also look at that and we say, well, gee, when is the coin broken? And it's interesting, when I teach, this is how I start every semester of statistics, is I sort of pose this problem to people and I ask them, where do you get suspicious? Where do you think the coin is broken? And I do get a range of answers. Some people think if I don't get 5 heads out of 10, that's a problem. Other people are more generous and, allow for maybe 4, maybe 3. But that tells you that everybody is thinking in different terms about what is meaningful and what is not.
Okay. So sometimes the statistical version and the gut check version don't always line up. And when they don't, sometimes we run into trouble in the courtroom. So Michelle, you've built some graphics to help us walk through this. Can we start with the simplest case, the coin flip?
I think the coin flip is the best example, right? We are trying to relate to the jury in terms that they understand, just like Steve was saying, just like you were saying, Chris, like we're all trying to speak the same language. I speak the visual language, which is really just showing a coin flip up on that screen. And then, on the right-hand side, showing how many times in a certain period of time, the coin shows heads and the coin shows tails, just to show people where their kind of line of what's comfortable and what's uncomfortable, and where it's a suspicious line between the coin flip, where it actually falls when you do it a few times. And so I think it's just as simple as that. Putting that up on the screen, as Steve will be, talking about the science, is just as helpful as it could possibly be.
Okay, so let's move to something with a little more complexity, a whole cloud of data. Michelle, can you show us the scatter plot?
I think the scatter plot is very helpful, even for me, listening to Steve talk about the statistical significance of these things. It's very interesting to see a line, and you're looking for a pattern, and you're seeing a bunch of dots on this line, and it follows that pattern. But then you've got a couple of those points that are far off, and they're weird. They're not part of the group. They're not following the pattern. So something is weird about those, and we should focus in on those. And obviously, I'm just explaining in very layman's terms, which is how a jury probably picks it up. But obviously, it's going to be accompanied with the actual scientific information that Steve is going to supplement it with.
Yeah. Steve, how do you handle the scatter plot and outliers and all that?
Well, again, I like to think that the intuition and the science have to merge and have to agree. Sometimes you have to move one to the other, or vice versa. But when you look at a graph like Michelle was showing us, you can see points that clearly don't make sense, and you could probably bring the statistics to bear that prove mathematically that those points don't make sense. But the next step is to actually then drill down and look at those points and see what's going on. Why are those points the way they are? Because when you do have these outliers from either an intuitive or a statistical standpoint, there is always something to learn. There is always something going on that we didn't expect to go on. And it's where you will be able to merge agreement between these two different perspectives.
Okay, now let's look at something real that actually shows up in cases. Michelle, could you bring up the immunization record?
Sure thing.
Okay, here's where the two kinds of significance collide again. A juror sees a clean checklist for years, and then something seems like it's missing, and that feels like causation, but the math might say it's not significant at all. So how do you bridge that gap?
Again, I think that it's important to basically merge the intuition and the scientific result. They both have to end up on the same page, or jurors are not going to be happy. You need to get them on the same page. Now, sometimes the math might be misspecified. The model might be incorrect. It might be missing factors, or it might have too many confusing factors. And by modifying it, it moves towards intuition. Or sometimes our intuition is just wrong. And if we think about it and we focus on where the issues are and where the problems are, and we think about specific situations more carefully, we can refine our intuition. So again, bridging the gap ultimately requires merging the scientific perspective with people's intuition.
That makes a lot of sense, particularly considering so many people don't particularly like being told that their intuition is wrong. So with that, Michelle, do you have any final thoughts with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the checklist is a great thing to put together for this type of argument, especially because in our juror pool, we often have what we call checklist jurors, which are people that want to see something laid out kind of text by text, point by point, and see where the pattern or outliers lie. And the best way to do that in a checklist is, you've got your 4 points of immunization, right? And you've got check, check, check. And then all of a sudden you've got an X or something else that does not match what the others are saying. And that is something to pay attention to. Or, as Steve pointed out, maybe it isn't necessarily something as scary to pay attention to, but it is something to focus on. And that's something as simple as a checklist can do for jurors to follow along with, the scientific information being told to them.
Well, thank you for being our trial consultant today, Michelle. And Steve, thank you for being our expert guide. Much appreciated. Adam, it's all yours.
IMS has served trusted law firms and corporations worldwide for more than 30 years and over 65,000 cases. As a strategic partner for the full case lifecycle, our integrated teams provide specialized advisory support, expert witness services, litigation consulting, visual advocacy, and presentation technology to elevate strategies and protect hard-earned reputations. Learn more at imslegal.com.